Hi, I'm Greg Filson, known from the BXG podcast. You can get that anywhere. I'm here to tell you about really great sunglasses from Ambassador Sunglasses. If you need any kind, any style, they really do a representation. Men or women, you'll find a perfect pair. Good prices, and with my promo code GTPHILS, all caps, you can get 50% off starting now. Yeah, please go ahead, get yourself a pair, get someone else a pair. They're a really good price. I can't recommend them highly enough. I've been wearing the 4 that I've got all the time, and I get compliments all the time. You will too. Ambassador Sunglasses, ambassador.com. Promo code GTPHILS.
Welcome to the BXG podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet at the nexus of the universe and are melded as seamlessly as power-hungry maniacs and men who just want to see the world burn. I am one of your hosts. Brenton Bestwick, alongside my co-host, the sticky bandit himself, Greg Filson. Greg, how are you this evening?
Why so serious, Brendan? That's really my thing about this. Why are we taking this so seriously?
Well, I find your lack of seriousness disturbing. This is episode 71. We have, for our Monday episode 71 of the BXG podcast, we have our list of top 10 favorite movie villains. We have listener submissions. We have a couple honorable mentions. I have a couple honorable mentions. You have a couple.
I have 2 honorable mentions. I have 2 honorable mentions. Yeah.
Okay. So we have that, and we're going to get into some of the most historical baddies to ever grace the big screen. But before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping. BXG Podcast publishes every Friday at 9 a.m. on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and other podcast services around the globe. You catch us on social media, Facebook.com/BXG Podcast, Instagram @BXG Podcast, @GTFills, @Y2B, Twitter @BXG Podcast, @GTFilson, @Y2B, and over on our YouTube channel, BXG Podcast. Also want to give a shout out to another pod that we're working with on some different things. If you're looking for a hilarious podcast with a variety of incredible guests, check out Neighbors Don't Knock. Host Brian Chambers and Philip Goffrey are on a mission to expand their neighborhood with laughs, great conversation, and by sharing their guest stories far and wide. Available anywhere you get your podcasts or at www.neighborsdon'tknock.com. New episodes every week, and regularly offer even more laughs over on their YouTube channel, so no need to knock. So you can check out them, Neighbors Don't Knock. Big fan of their stuff. And then additionally, since this goes live Monday, then I will have recorded a segment on Geek Sweat podcast in which I went on there and talked about the Cowboy Bebop live action series, the Netflix series that was unceremoniously canceled about a month after it released. Not 100% sure when that's going live, but keep an eye out for that. So, villains. Let's talk about villains. There's all kinds of villains. There's benevolent villains. There's villains who seem to have a cause. There are empathetic villains. Then there's psychopaths and men who just want to see the world burn. What's your favorite kind of villain?
I like a victim of society villain. He didn't have to be this way, but then society around him forced him to go a direction. He or she. I will say, I actually don't have any female villains, unfortunately, in my list. There's a little thing, but no female villains. I had some close ones and ones that, but there's nothing against that. There are some really great female villains out there, but just my list didn't include any on this end. I mean, it is what it is. But I always feel the females are the heroes of the movies. Maybe, I don't know.
Indeed.
But I like the victim of society villain. What about you, Brandon?
Well, I think I like
circumstance.
Victim of circumstance.
Yeah,
sure. I think I like a villain who believes that what he's doing is right.
Sure.
Even though it's clearly not, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But let's get into it. Our top 10 list of villains. We got some listener submissions, and let's do our honorable mentions first. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll go first on this one. I have my two. I have Freddy Krueger, just in general. Great villain. The only problem is that those movies get a little rough. The Friday the 13th movies get a little rough.
That's Nightmare, buddy.
Or Nightmare. Nightmare. Sorry, I had the wrong listing there. But yeah, those movies just get a little rough. He's a good villain in the first one, second one a little bit, but then they just don't really work for me. And then it becomes like Freddy versus Jason and all this stuff just doesn't work for me. And then I have Loki in the Avengers because he is a good villain in that movie, but then he really isn't a villain, or he's like an anti-hero. He's a whatever. So I really like him in the Avengers as a villain, but then we realize that he kind of isn't, or he is what he is. He's
Loki. Yeah.
He's Loki. I mean, that's just what he is. So that would be my two. Freddy Krueger was one of those ones where he's definitely like a great villain if there's one movie or two movies, but because there's too many, it just falls off the list.
Yeah. And I should note, if I had any villains that were franchise villains, I picked the movie that they were my favorite in.
Okay.
Which kind of will play into my honorable mentions here. The first is Jafar from Aladdin. It is my favorite animated movie. And I just think that he's a great villain because he just wants stuff, and he's kind of manipulative, and he's conniving, and he's got this annoying parrot that's just around, and he just sort of tolerates and everything with Iago. My second honorable mention, was Captain Barbosa from Pirates of the Caribbean and the Curse of the Black Pearl. I just watched it recently, and it just kind of brought back to me how much I like this character. I think Jeffrey Rush is amazing in this role. And there was something about the scene where he's explaining the curse to Elizabeth Keira Knightley, and it ends with him saying, "You best start believing in ghost stories. You're in one." And that for me is just like, that's something that's just a villain would say. You know what I mean? Right. It's a classic villain type line. The next one from my honorable mentions is maybe a little bit of a surprise, but I think it has to be included in some sense because the guy was such a douchebag in this movie, and it's Bradley Cooper as Sack Lodge in Wedding Crashers.
That is good. Yes.
He's just such a condescending prick in that movie.
Yes.
And the way he plays that role, and it makes you feel like he's an ass. You know what I mean? And that's really not the role that Bradley Cooper typically plays. So to see him in that role is kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great call. Nicely done, Brandon. I like that one.
So I'm gonna take three listener ones, and then we'll go into our top tens.
Sounds good.
So the first one comes from the legendary David S. from Carn City.
Yes.
Who writes in and says, "I duly understand that this character was essentially the Mr. Belding to Harry Potter's Zach Morris in his inability to control a high school. But Lord Voldemort is a favorite villain there, which makes sense, for Dave."
Yes.
A lot of these other guys probably haven't made it out to Carn City yet. So the next one comes from my wife, Melissa Bestwick. She had Cruella de Vil, Ursula, and Gaston. So heavy into the Disney stuff there. And then Eddie McDonald wrote in and had Debo from Friday, who was played by Tiny Liston.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that. Poor David S.
Yeah.
We're David S. They'll get cable out there
Or-
eventually.
Eventually, probably 20 years from now, when we're all running on like just air for internet, they'll have cable.
Yeah. So let's do why don't we do I'm just looking to see how many more submissions we have. Let's do 10 through 6, then we'll do the rest of the listeners, and then we'll do 5 through 1. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
I can go first. So
Okay.
my 10, I think listeners of this probably think I'd have this character higher, but I did it as, a victim of circumstance, a victim of society. And because I'm not sure he's a villain. You're not sure if you even read the book, you're not sure. And I maybe give away. Initially, I had it as the character of Patrick Bateman, but then I think maybe the villain actually is society in American Psycho. I feel like society caused Patrick Bateman to go crazy. He's living in, really gnarly New York. He is a victim of being this, spoiled rich kid. So my idea was, is it society? Is it Patrick Bateman? Is it other things? Is he even a villain at all? Do we even know he did anything at all? That always is the question of American Psycho. So my number 10 pick, Patrick Bateman, society led him that way, American Psycho.
So I had this debate with myself about a couple characters, is that there's certain people that they're the protagonist, but are they also the villain?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I ended up leaving a big one off my list entirely for that reason, but it was also a listener submission, so we can maybe hit on it at that point. Right. Number 10 for me is it's kind of cheating because it's a package deal, right? It's two people. But you can't have, it's like peanut butter and cocaine. You can't have one without the other. Okay. And for me, it is the wet / sticky bandits themselves, Harry and Marv, the immortal undead bandits from the Home Alone franchise.
Yeah.
Nothing kills them.
Nothing kills them.
They should have died.
And they want to kill a child.
They want to kill a child. They want to steal things. They want to clog sinks. They want to leave sticky stuff. They should have died 40 times each in those two movies. And yet, both times lived to walk away. They may be the MCU's version of Mephisto.
They may be. Yeah,
so
this is true.
Harry and Lloyd, Daniel Stern, Joe Pesci, the Sticky Wet Bandits, Home Alone.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, I will say nothing funny on my list, unfortunately. I tried to, but then just like the villains I had were all just villainous. Actually, like the movies themselves were villainous. And so my number 9 is Dr. No, from Dr. No, the James Bond movie, 1962. And I had this for a couple of reasons. He's a great villain himself, but he also sets the standard for villains, and not just in James Bond movies, but in other kind of movies of this era, of spy movies, of heist movies. He's this character that is very slimy. He looks slimy. He looks, he looks like a villain. If you just took a picture and you saw Dr. No, you'd be like, that guy's a villain. You wouldn't need to know much more about it. So I think that, that's why I have him in there. It's not, he's very villainous. He wants to kill, James Bond. He's a rogue agent from Spectre. All these things make him a villain. But then at the fact that he just sets the standard. I mean, this is, to me, this is kind of, he's the Michael Jordan of villains in this genre, because he sets the standard of what you're trying to be. Like, if you're trying to be a good villain in a movie, you're trying to be Dr. No. Doesn't mean he's the best villain. It just means you're setting that villain. Now, we will talk about Michael Jordan in maybe a different podcast, but there's that standard set, and then you're trying to, either match it or beat it. But your goal is, I want to be at least in that area of Dr. No. So that's why I have him, Dr. No, James Bond, one of my favorite movie franchises.
Very good. Number 9 for me is a combination of it's an amalgamation of things that I like. Nicolas Cage, great hair, and awesome action movie, right?
Wow.
So it's a lot of different ways I could go with this, right?
You got a lot of different ways. Got
Right.
me hanging on the edge here.
Hanging on the edge. John Malkovich, Cyrus the Virus, Grissom, Con Air.
I knew you were going Con Air because that movie's incredible. That's a hell of a pick.
Completely unhinged.
Yep.
John Malkovich is great in this role. He plays a good like nut job, I think.
Yeah.
I think
he's in the New Pope, which I talk about. He's a nut job.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about some of the John Malkovich roles where he's a bad guy. I mean, Teddy KGB from Rounders, another one that you could kind of plop into that. The guy in why can't I think of that movie that everybody liked but wasn't actually good? Bird Box, where he was kind of villainous, kind of not. But I think for him, and this also being a great Nicolas Cage movie, Con Air, with that hair thing. Cyrus the Virus, man, what a name too. Cyrus the Virus, what a name for a bad guy, for a villain. Great role, great performance. Cyrus the Virus.
Yeah, that's terrific name, great pick. This may seem a little low. I don't know if you even have them, but it's the first appearance by Javier Bardem on my list, but not the last. Anton Chigor, No Country for Old Men. This to me is that understated villain. He's just kind of hanging around doing stuff. And I love that. I mean, that movie, in a way, I feel like it's underrated. When you talk about No Country for Old Men, I went back and read the book a couple of years ago, and the book's amazing.
Same. I've also read the book.
Yeah, the book is amazing. But then you watch the movie, and that's one of those ones where like the book isn't better, the movies, those are just good things. They're like good parallels to each other, and you still feel that the venom that he has. There's just the pure hatred for everything around him, and just like the vitriol and the way Javier Bardem is able to do this. I mean, it's so funny because Javier Bardem as like an actual person seems just like, the most jovial guy in the world. But boy, when he has to slip into that villain role, I mean, I'm getting chills thinking about him in this movie because he is just so slithery, so sneaky. I love this movie. I love him in it. It's one of my favorite villains. It's almost the thing where you're like rooting for him because he's such a good villain.
Yeah, sure. Number 8 for me is, and I know I gave David S. from Carton City a hard time about it, but number 8 for me is Voldemort, specifically from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Now, this is the one where he's on screen for probably the least amount of time. He just comes in at the end, but he just shows up. Or they transport. There's the port key for Harry and Cedric Diggory, played by a very young Robert Pattinson, that transports them to the graveyard. And Voldemort's reaction to seeing somebody else that is not Harry Potter is, "You're dead now." And so that is the type of villain where it's just the singular goal of this is, this is the revenge piece that I want. Yeah. I want to kill Harry Potter. And so there's just this other innocent kid. He's like, boom, you're dead. Boom, roasted. You know what I mean? And they have the battle and things like that. And realistically, he's probably more of a presence in the other movies down the line. And he is incredibly creepy. Ralph Fiennes with like all the makeup and the Voldemort, like the suit and everything. He's incredibly creepy, that character. But for me, where I think that his absolute most villainous is in that scene where he just murks Robert Pattinson on the spot. Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire, book 4, movie 4.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I may or may not have that. My next pick, my number 6 is Alonzo Harris, Training Day, Denzel.
King Kong ain't got shit on him.
King Kong. Don't talk to me like I'm a 3. I mean, this is like this character where it goes out of the realm of Denzel. This is where Denzel won an Academy Award.
Right.
The first Academy Award for Denzel. And the first one since Sidney Poitier won one. R.I.P. Sidney Poitier, but for an African American man, and it is intense. I love Training Day. I haven't watched it in a few years, but it is one of those movies. I love a cop movie. Love a cop movie. Number one. I love a shady cop movie even more. And then you have the shadiest cop on the block just running stuff. And it's just, he is so evil, so manipulative. That's the thing. I mean, like, that's a good villain is when you can just manipulate anyone. You know, you can take anyone and just flip them. And the way he gets after it, the way you see a turn in Denzel that you've never seen before is incredible. So he's villainous. He's manipulative. He is just scary. Like, he's a scary character having nothing. You don't see him really do a lot of anything that's scary until he does the scary stuff. And then you're just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Scary character. One of my favorites, Alonzo Harris.
Okay. So what are we on? 7?
We are on 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, that would be 6.
Well, yeah, I haven't gone yet for 7.
You haven't gone, yes.
Right. So I have for me, this is one of those movies. It's like cult classic sort of deal, and it's one that it's just for me, right? It's just for me, and it's one of my like guilty pleasure movies. So the actor is Alan Ford, and the movie is Snatch, and the character is Bricktop. And this is a Guy Ritchie English gangster movie. What's funny?
I love this movie. That's a heck of a pull.
Yeah, it's one of my. It's like if we ever do like guilty pleasure movies or something like that, like just comfort food movies, Snatch is probably my favorite like comfort food movie.
Okay.
There's just something about
that's a good one. We'll have to do that soon because I love that as a list.
Yeah, it's not, it's not on anybody's list of best movies or anything like that. And I just love this character because he's this old man that feeds people to pigs after he has them murdered. And, he's rigging boxing matches and he's cutting guys' ball sacks with a knife. He's, threatening people. Feed him to the pigs, Errol. And that's the aesthetic I love. That's part of the reason I love Ted Lasso so much is just the British, the British accents and stuff like that. And that's why I love this movie, Snatch. And it's an all-star cast. So many people in it that if we told you, Benicio del Toro, Brad Pitt, Jason Statham, there's others. I mean, there's some, a couple of I think the black guy that's in The Walking Dead, the whole thing. It's such a good movie, and it's got like one of those plots that's like all over the place and then it gets tied together. And the central villain of all of it is Bricktop, played by Alan Ford. So that was number 7 for me. Bricktop, Snatch.
Nice.
So,
okay. So number 6. Number 6.
Yeah, 6. Yeah, it comes after 7.
All right.
Or before 7.
Sorry, I had a little switch there. So my number 6 is Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, it's just, a lot of people might argue he's the best villain of all time. I think for me, the reason why he isn't is he's in this movie for 17 minutes.
Sure.
So, but it's an amazing 17 minutes. He won an Academy Award for it. So it's a creepy movie. I mean, the scene with the fava beans and the Chianti is like a classic scene.
Sure.
He's so creepy, but it's the idea of Hannibal Lecter that actually makes him creepier than the actual scenes that he's in.
Right.
So, yeah, and that's the idea is like, if you can be a character that is terrifying without even being in the scene, that has to mean something.
Right.
And Silence of the Lambs is one of the creepiest movies ever. It really, truly is. And it's just so well acted. If you haven't seen it, which I realize a lot of people actually haven't seen Silence of the Lambs too. Are you one of them?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't watch creepy stuff.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Because it's a psychological thriller, but it really like digs deep psychologically. Like if you are like on the midst of something, like you have like a surgery tomorrow or something, or even if you got a dentist appointment the next day, I would suggest not watching this.
Right.
You want to have the next day, you might want to be doing something happy.
Sure.
That's the thing. You want to look forward to something good. So this is probably the creepiest movie I have on this list. But just for lack of airtime, I think is actually the reason, even though the presence is there throughout the 2-hour plus movie. It's just he's not in it enough, but he's still he's number 6 on my list. So there we go.
Yeah. That's one of those things where I feel like it's the whole concept of scarcity breeds tension.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what that character, like you said, 17 minutes, but he's terrifying. He's a specter over throughout.
Yeah.
Number 6 for me, if Dr. No is the Michael Jordan of villains, then this is the Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell of villains. Okay. It's the Wicked Witch of the West.
Nice.
Wizard of Oz, classic villain. The
victim of circumstance.
This has got to be like the first movie that kids see and even my kids, this movie is almost 100 years old. And it's like the first movie I feel like where you can understand that this is a bad guy. You know what I mean? And I think for now, almost a full century. I mean, when did it come out? Maybe the 30s.
1941.
Okay, so it's 80 years old.
I think it's 41.
We can
look it up. We have the internet.
We've got the Google. Wizard of Oz, 1939. Okay.
Oh, 39. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a shade over 80 years old. So for 80 years, and this character holds up. There's a reason why like Wicked is a thing, or they made that weird prequel with Franco, the Oz Great and Powerful. Like there's a reason, and it's not centered around Dorothy, it's centered around the witch. She's more compelling in many cases. I just think that this is like the OG bad guy, you know what I mean? Or I guess bad girl. So
it's good. It's a good the only reason she didn't make my list is because Dorothy killed her sister, so she was pissed. And I was like,
that's a revenge mission.
It's a revenge mission. So victim of circumstance that kind of pulled me a little, it was also just,
she wanted those shoes.
Yeah, they were sweet.
Give me those shoes.
They were sweet. Yeah. One limited edition.
Yeah. There's silver in the
stock
box.
X. Yeah. Stock X.
Yeah.
Hard to get them on there.
Right. Silver in the novel.
They are silver in the book. Yeah.
For what it's
that
worth.
wouldn't really play that well, on the screen, even though it was, when they colorize.
Can you imagine going to the theater and then half of that movie's in color and you'd never seen that before?
It
like
had
that would
to
make people have a stroke.
I was gonna say it's at least I would say 3% of the population had some kind of thing happen.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too outlandish. I'm not going to get jump into hyperbole, but 3% of the population was like, oh my God, something bad has happened to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't have drank that Coca-Cola with actual cocaine in it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trace them out, but still, you never know.
Yeah. Maybe that bottle got stuck on the line. Okay. So let's do some more. Let's do the rest of the listener Johnny's, and we'll start with John Kish. Galvatron, Transformers the movie, great pull, John.
That's great.
Deacon Frost from Blade, played by Stephen Dorff, and Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. That's a very appropriately John Kish list.
Yes,
I will say that, but I respect it.
I do too.
Yeah. He wasn't sure if he was going to have to come on and defend any of those choices, and I said, no, you don't have to do that.
Those are good lists.
Yeah, Jeff Patterson, Anton Chigor, No Country for Old Men, Christopher Waltz in Inglourious Bastards. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
John Patterson, Bill the Butcher, Gangs of New York, and Daniel Plainview, There Will Be Blood. That's the one that I left off because I just wasn't sure. Yeah. He's the protagonist the whole movie, but he's also pure evil.
Right.
So I wasn't sure. I couldn't, in my head, I couldn't justify him being the protagonist and being on the list.
Sure. Yeah. It's
so
rough.
That's same thing with the whole Pat Bateman thing. I would throw that in there as well. But those are also great. Daniel Day-Lewis, both of those. Jay Patterson, Dennis Hopper, and Blue Velvet.
That's Blue Ribbon. That's in the movie. That's great.
T-Side Podcast, Eric Killmonger from Black Panther, and then you have Janie's.
Yeah, I have Janie's list. She did hers in alphabetical order, so she has Voldemort. I'm going to go backwards. Voldemort, Harry Potter franchise. She didn't do the single out movie, but sure. I mean, I think most of us probably would say the same movie. Jack Torrance, The Shining. Jerry Falwell from The Eyes of Tammy Faye, recent movie, really good. Actually, I should have had that on my list for the Friday show. Cruella de Vil, 101 Dalmatians. Amon Goth for Schindler's List. It's pretty good. Randolph and Mortimer Duke, Trading Places. Also good characters, kind of fall in the Sticky Bandits realm. Joan Crawford from Mummy Dearest. Anton Chigor, No Country for Old Men. And Calvin Candy, Django Unchained.
Good lists all around. We'd like to thank everybody who contributed.
Appreciate thank you.
That we always like listener submissions when we do lists. So thank you. You want to switch it up? You want me to go first for?
Yeah, you go ahead.
5 through 1. Okay, so this one is probably not one that a lot of people think about, but I think that what this particular character pulled off is maybe more egregious than anybody else on this list, and that's Dr. Mann, played by Matt Damon in Interstellar. Because for his own safety and salvation was willing to sacrifice the entire human race.
Yep.
Yeah. And then when they figured it out what was going on, he tried to kill Matthew McConaughey. So he was noble at heart, obviously, for creating the project that they launched. But then once he realized that he was up shit's creek without a paddle, said screw you to the entire human race and just went all in on himself. And like I said, I think that that's about as egregious as anybody on this list, save maybe one.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's
a good
Matt Damon, Interstellar.
Mine is probably like your prototypical what you think of horror movies. It's the best character in horror movies, Michael Myers. Halloween.
The Shade.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is about Halloween, it's still my favorite horror movie because you never actually see him doing it. And it's the fear of Michael Myers. It's the scene Michael Myers. There's something about that. And every year, I mean, I've watched this movie every year since I think I was 9 or 10. So we're talking 26, 27 years I've watched this movie, and it still gets me. Like every year, I'm like, not scary, but it's still just like, holy cow, this was like really done well. This is what a horror movie is all about. You don't need to see blood and gore to have a horror movie. You need to have the anticipation of blood and gore, because the idea behind this movie is that your imagination will always think of something worse than what actually can happen. So every time there's a scene where he does something, it cuts away. And then you picture it in your head. And so it's Michael Myers doing whatever he does. He keeps living. And it's one of those things where like the movies keep going and going, but the original Halloween is so good that I don't even care. I don't care that the other movies happen and they're good and bad, whatever they are. But that first one is just so standalone, perfect, the perfect horror movie. It's a 10 out of 10. Can't top it. And his character is so good without doing, without saying much, without seeing him actually do the killings. So to me, it's just like great villain, great backstory to lead into it, and then you don't actually see him do anything.
Right.
That's the thing.
So 2 follow-up questions. Number 1, would you find Michael Myers scary if he were DJing a Halloween party in a warehouse in Youngstown?
No.
Okay.
I would not. No. I would assume at that point he's just doing it for the art.
Right.
In a purple attic.
Well, no, he's in a warehouse in Youngstown. But
okay. I just
he may be prepared to set.
Well, I would say he might have a set though that's a purple attic just to really set the art scene.
Right, with a creepy ass cat.
Yes.
And then number 2 question: who is more unkillable, Michael Myers or Harry and Marv?
one of those two Michael Myers.
No, they're Harry and Marv.
But it could have been a different name.
No, because Michael Myers is like 6'6" or something.
Right. Yeah.
That dude should have been a power forward.
Marv is tall, but he's not 6'6". I don't know. That's tough.
That is tough. You telling me Michael Myers couldn't have just developed a drop step and just gone to the NBA? He's like 6'6".
He wasn't about that money life, man. About that killing life.
Yeah.
You know,
well, they always
different
ask
strokes for different folks.
They ask him, you know, why you keep killing people, man, but nobody asks him what's killing him.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mental health awareness.
You know, maybe he tore like a something in his knee.
And that's why he moves so slow, too.
Yeah, that's why he moves so slow.
Yeah, probably got an ACL. Number 4 for me. Just let all that sink in here. Number 4 for me is a guy who one time in a movie wiped out half of all living things in the universe. So maybe slightly more egregious than trying to just screw over the whole human race when he screwed over half of all races.
Yeah.
And it's the Mad Titan Thanos, specifically from Infinity War. I thought that that character was more compelling in Infinity War versus Endgame.
Sure.
But he's one of those guys that, you know, he thinks that what he's doing is right. He thinks that, you know, like the What If episode. Well, it sounds like genocide, but it's efficient.
No, it's efficient.
You know, but then there's like the whole thing with Hawkeye where there's so many people that, you know, Thanos was right. So there is that balancing act, but I do think that Infinity War, as much as it is an Avengers movie, it's a Thanos movie. And I thought that role was executed perfectly, you know, CGI or what have you, but Josh Brolin, you know, providing the voice acting and all of that. And Thanos is a version of another character who's going to pop up here for a new generation.
Right. Yeah. I didn't have Thanos in this, and it's not because I don't think he's a great villain. It was just the Marvel villain thing is always a little tough. Yeah. And for me, it was like Loki was a better villain in Avengers than Thanos for me, in a sense, because Loki didn't think what he was doing was right. He was literally just trying. Sure. He was out to kill. Like Thanos literally thought he was doing something right, and it wasn't necessarily villainous in my mind. I understand he is a villain. He is a villain.
Right.
It was just that, since he thought it was for the good, that was my reason. Where it's like, is he truly a villain? And yes, he is. But for me, it was just because he thought it was right. That's why I didn't have him on the list. He's a great villain. It was just since there was that one little side where it's like for the greater good, whatever. Sure. But yeah, mine killed an old lady out of spite. So my number 4 is Raul Silver from Skyfall, James Bond. So this is taking Dr. No and saying that's a great villain. I'm going to emulate this, and I'm going to next level. I'm killing an old lady just because I simply was a little pissed off about something she said to me. So Skyfall is my favorite James. Yes, James Bond's my favorite. Skyfall's my favorite James Bond movie. Javier Bardem is the second time he makes an appearance on my list, which is kind of great. I did not do that intentionally. He knows how to be a villain. He literally does not care about anyone, not even himself. That's like one of those things too that makes you a good villain. If you have to, I think it's one of those things where, like, if I kill other people and I die, that's okay. But as long as those people are dead, I'm okay with that. I'm going to kill M and I'll kill myself, but she's also going to be gone. So I'm good. I'm solid with that. No remorse for anything. He would watch anyone get killed. He would try to kill people. He didn't care. He just did not simply care. And I think that made him a great villain. There was nothing like they didn't try to make him sympathetic. They put the backstory in there, but the end game was he just actually was just crazy and wanted M to die, wanted James Bond to die, wanted the whole society to die based purely on the fact that, he was a little pissed off. True. And that's a great villain to me. You're just a little triggered and you go loose. That's so, and he's got a great, he talks great in this movie. It's just one of those things where he just kind of holds all those villainous things.
Yeah. I've said, Skyfall is the only James Bond movie that I can say for sure that I've seen the whole way through. And I know he is a compelling villain in that movie.
Mm.
He's also a compelling villain in No Country for Old Men, which is my third pick, Anton Chigor. Just completely unhinged in this movie. The intensity which he plays that character with is unmistakable. Everything he does makes you uncomfortable. When he has the scene in the convenience store with the coin and he says, I cannot call it for you. That whole scene, it makes you uncomfortable.
So good. Yeah.
He's so intense. And then, like you'd said, for people who haven't read the book, please pick that book up, because I think that it's even dialed up to 11 in the book.
Oh yeah.
It's just, that movie is a very good representation of like a modern day Western, not like a Civil War, like a, cowboys type Western. It's a modern day Western. And his character, he's not necessarily, looking at the grand scheme of things, the real bad guy, where you have like these overarching sort of like, cartel members or whatever, but he is the most dangerous foe in that movie to everyone involved. And like I said, the intensity which he plays that role in is because he's so quiet. He's so reserved. He's not explosive. He doesn't get angry. It's just so intense, the way he plays that role. And I think that, again, he's another one where you can just look in his eyes and see evil. And that's why I think, for me, he was number 3, Anton Chigor, Javier Bardem, No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, awesome. For me, he's already been mentioned, but we're bringing him back, and we actually picked the same movie. So Voldemort, Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire. He's just out for killing children. So that's right there. You could have really went any Harry Potter movie, because the guy just wants to kill kids.
Right.
Because once again, he's a little pissed off. This is the thing. He's just a little pissed off, and he's like, I'm going to kill a kid. This one just has to be Cedric Diggory, Robert Pattinson. It's like, you're not Harry Potter. Boom.
Boom.
Like you said, you're out of here. And it's just like, that right then and there, if your end game is just like, I'm killing this 14-year-old, you're a villain. And he's not in the movie, like you said, that much.
Yeah.
But when he is, it's just like, kid dead.
Yeah.
Let it be done. So it is. Right. So it should be. Yeah. So not to add too much more, but that's just it's such a great scene, because even though I think most people have read the books and then they watch the movies. So you read the book and you see that, but then you actually see it happen in the movie. You're like, well, that's effed. Yeah. Well, just like, this is so,
because it's just like, it's not even, it's like an afterthought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When the scene happens, Cedric Diggory's like an afterthought. It's just like, hey, who's this guy? It doesn't matter. Kill him. Yeah. He tries to stand up to him for a second, and it doesn't work out for him. So
Voldemort.
Yeah. I have a feeling that our last two are the same.
They're definitely, if they're not the same, then one of us messed up.
I think that they're probably in the same order.
We'll find out very quickly. Yeah.
Number 2 for me is actually probably going to be a surprise. I think that most people knowing me would have said that this was likely number 1, but it's actually number 2, and it is Jar Binks from
greatest villain. That's crazy. Holy
greatest villain of them all.
Is one of the best. Yeah,
one of the worst. Just pure evil. Just from the 7th circle of hell. Jar Binks. All my best.
Yeah, I had the same one.
So number 2, specifically from Empire Strikes Back, because I think it's where.
Okay. So we didn't have the same order. Okay.
We do.
We do not. No.
Okay. Mine is Darth Vader from The Empire Strikes Back. I think that this is the most screen time in which he gets the most screen time, and it's where he's the most at his most evil. I don't know if evil is the right word, but the most
Darthiest. It's just like the Vader.
He's how many times, like how many admirals or commanders or whatever does he choke out with the Force in this movie? And then he, uses baits Han Solo, screws around with Lando, takes over his city, freezes Han and Carbonite just so that he can get to his kid. And then also, it's just like, it's probably not on the same level as going to see The Wizard of Oz and it becoming color halfway, not even halfway through the movie, like a third of the way through the movie, but mind-blowing because nobody, I'm sure, saw this twist coming in the late 1970s when Darth Vader reveals that he's Luke Skywalker's father. Right. Like that would have been, you know what I mean? And like the problem is because things are so formulaic now, like we knew that Thanos was going to win an Infinity War, and then they were going to get themselves off the mat, dust themselves off, and they were going to win an Endgame. It would have been riskier to allow that to linger in some form. You know what I mean? I always thought, even for the Endgame thing, that they shouldn't even do a trailer. They should just show a splash screen of this is what the movie's called.
Right.
There will never be anything in movies like that again.
No.
And I believe that there will never be anything in a movie that is that sort of like pop culture phenomenon like Star Wars was at that time and continues to be, in which there's something that's that important, that's kept that secret, that will just have people like perfect examples, the Spider-Man thing. Toby and Garfield being in it was the worst kept secret. Imagine if they somehow would have been able to keep that under wraps. You know what I mean? But you just can't.
Yeah, it's impossible.
So that specific, I am your, Luke, I am your father, or, you know who your father is, whatever. I think that's a Mandela effect thing. But, I think, Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back is, it's the go-to for, well, not the go-to, but it's number 2 for me.
My number 2 is Joker, Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. He just wants to see the world burn. He burns money in this movie. He does not care about anything else. He doesn't care if he's getting the crap beat out of him. I always said that's a thing too. If you're willing to die for your villainous behavior, that has to mean something. Mm-hmm. And he does not care. He loves. It's just it's still replicated to this. I mean, like people still dress up as that Joker, and there's something to be said about that. And he does not care, and you don't know his backstory. He changes his backstory. He changes the way, when he, finds Maggie Gyllenhaal and he's just choking around with the shrimp, and he's eating the shrimp, and he eats the shrimp in such a creepy way. Mm-hmm. And it's all those things. And then to point out that the person that played him ended up overdosing on medication because it terrified him so much to dig so deep into this character. Yeah. So there's something to be said that this character affected the actor so much that we no longer have probably what end up would be one of our greatest actors ever, leaving us too early because this character is so maniacal. And I mean, the Joker is the perfect comic book villain. I don't think many of us would disagree. I think, if you see a Joker cover for a Batman comic book, you're like, well, at worst, this is going to be awesome. Yeah. And so he's the embodiment of it. This is everyone always says it's based off The Killing Joke, very lightly based off the Killing Joke is much more violent, much more rageful. But for a PG-13 movie, for a Batman movie,
well, I think Joker's more based off Killing Joke.
Yeah. There was just initially when this came out, people thought that this was The Killing Joke. And so it's creepy. And it's also one of those things where like you do kind of find out that Batman isn't good. He's not necessarily good either. He is the Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. And so all those kind of things, because, the Joker brings out the worst in everyone. He turns people and he, I dressed up as Nurse Joker that Halloween. I mean, there's just one of those things where it's, it's one of those iconic scenes where he's just walking out of the, of the hospital blowing up. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. And that's what makes him such a great villain.
So just to piggyback on that, because my number one is the Joker from The Dark Knight. And I remember when you and I saw it together, we did the double feature Batman Begins and then The Dark Knight up at the theater up there in Meadville. And I said to you as we were walking out that I just could have watched them go round and round again for another 5 hours. You know what I mean? Because he's always like, Batman is the world's greatest detective. And we've hammered that home on numerous episodes. In this movie, the Joker was just one step ahead of him at all times, which is typically the case. But like you said, all of the little creepy things, and especially a lot of it, if you really look into this movie, a lot of it was ad-libbed. A lot of it was just Heath doing what he thought would make the character creepier in that moment. So, for example, the scene where everyone's clapping about Gordon's promotion, and then they show him and he starts clapping and he's doing like the whole thing in the cell where he's, very, very exaggerated. That was totally ad-libbed. When the remote didn't go off in the hospital scene and he's like standing there on the side of the thing going like this, like shrugging his shoulders and everything, totally ad-libbed. So I just felt like, I feel like because, they have like the whole grid of like, lawful good, chaotic evil, lawful neutral, whatever. Like he's in the embodiment of chaotic evil. Like that's all he wants is chaos. That's all he wants is chaos. There's no rhyme or reason. And I think Alfred, with his story about the jewel thief in the jungle, some men just want to see the world burn. That's what makes a perfect villain to me. Is it's not about the money, it's not about the power, it's not about the righteous ending that they're angling for. It's a perfect villain just wants there to be chaos. And it is a shame that we couldn't get Joker in the third movie due to Heath's death, and that we'll never have another one as good. I mean, I haven't seen the Joker movie. But
it's a great movie, but it's different.
Sure. Right. But I can tell you that Jared Leto's Joker was certainly not in the same ballpark. And Jax being what Jax is, it's not shooting for that same sort of vibe. We'll never get another Joker like this. This is the quintessential Joker performance. And I think that, like you said, he's the perfect comic book villain. He's really just a perfect movie villain because he is exactly like what you said. He brings the worst out in everybody. And that is what a villain is all about.
And the scene where he has his head out the window and he's like in the air it brings chills. I've seen that movie. I couldn't even tell you. And every single time the music stops, it's just him riding out the car with his hair out the window, soaking in the city just coming down upon itself because of what he's done. It's an iconic scene. I mean, it's a great, great scene. My number one is Senator Palpatine from Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. One of the great twists in movie history. One of the great movies in movie history. No, of course not. That would not be the case. It's Darth Vader. Empire Strikes Back. It's the best Star Wars movie probably we'll ever get. That's the way it is. We just based on our age and what we know, and people may disagree. I mean, what you said is when you find out, and I've always there's moments in your life where like, man, I wish I was in a theater for a certain moment, and I wish I was this age. And I'm not like someone that goes back and be like, oh, I should have been born in the 70s. I'm not normally that person, but to be in the theater when you find out, like you said, the scene that you said, thank you R2D2. When the scene is set and you find out that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, what a holy shit moment.
Yeah.
Like it almost feels like, and I know you can't do this, but like they should have stopped the film for just a second just to let everyone be like, you got to be what? What just happened? Because it's just, even going to Star Wars movies now is such a fun experience, even though the movies aren't as good.
Right.
This movie's Empire Strikes Back is the best sci-fi movie ever made. And then you have that scene. The movie's already so good. And then you have that scene and you're like, oh my gosh, this maniacal bastard is the father of the hero of the story. And it's so good. He doesn't care. It's a different kind of I don't care. He does have his kind of twist, in the very end, but we're talking specific movie. So this movie, you get all him just being badass, just Darth Vader going all out, which I love. I love me a Darth Vader doing his thing. And that's, he's still my favorite. Kids still love Darth Vader. It's a character that is a 50-50 split. People love Darth Vader, even though he is pure evil. And that's why I love it. But I think this will be my one thing. You can have your opinion, but if it's not Darth Vader, if it's not Heath Ledger's Joker, you're wrong. I'm just going to say that. I 100% say if those two, I just really, if you've seen these movies, and also I would say, if you're listening to this podcast, I think that should be another thing. If you're listening to this podcast, you've seen these movies, you understand those characters, there's really good villains, and I won't disagree with the rest of our villains, but Darth Vader and the Joker.
They're iconic.
It's a whole nother level of villain.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. I honestly, I knew Vader was going to be on the list. I knew he was going to be high on the list. I almost put, and it's only he's only in the movie for probably not even 5 minutes, just a couple scenes here and there, but I almost put Rogue One.
Yeah.
Because of that scene at the end where the guys are like, are we okay? Are we safe? And then the red lightsaber comes on and he just cuts through them like hot knife through butter.
It's literally one of the best scenes ever in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. It's just because you don't see it coming.
They just didn't have the technology to do that. A scene like that in the 70s, really, to make it look good.
Yeah.
Or they would.
No, that scene is.
It's just it's the best scene. It's the best.
It actually might be the best scene in Star Wars. Yeah, it really might be the best Star Wars scene. It really is, because it's insane. Because you don't see it coming. I saw that in the theater opening night. Yeah. And everyone was like, blow. And this was in Juneau, Alaska. You're literally everyone is just like, oh my God. You're cheering
for the
bad guy too. And you're cheering for the worst guy ever, just to just slice through everyone.
That was
a great scene.
Oh my, when the lightsaber kicks on, I think there was an audible gasp in my theater, just like a you know what I mean?
There was one kid.
Yeah.
I remember one kid who just was like, holy shit. Just lost his mind.
Yeah. What a great scene.
Yeah.
But like I said, I almost picked that over Empire, but I think you have to give the nod to Empire. It's like you said, it's the best science fiction movie ever made. So that concludes our list for our top 10 villains. Listener submissions, couple honorable mentions in there in the form of Sack Lodge, Wedding Crashers.
Straight Sack Lodge.
Sack. His name's Sack. This has been episode 71. BXG Podcast publishes every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 a.m. Pacific Time, 4 a.m. Hawaiian Time.
Aloha.
On Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. You catch us on social media, Facebook.com/BXG Podcast, Instagram @BXG Podcast, @GTFills, @Y2B, Twitter @BXG Podcast, @GTFills, and @Y2B, and over on our YouTube channel where you can see the most recent episode review of the Book of Boba Fett's The Streets of Mos Espa, as well as our discussion on the first 3 legs of The Amazing Race. Check all that out over on the YouTube channel. We hope you enjoyed your weekend hug. Just wrapping our arms around you, and just the warmth embrace of a
good hug,
good hug, a solid hug. It's hug time, Poppy.
It's hug time, Poppy.
Yeah. Okay, Branch. Take care, friends.
Thanks for listening.